purpose of today is really to discuss fraud in the insurance industry and how it can be mitigated. Stephen Walker, who is Senior Program Manager at Kainos and is also former Head of Enterprise Fraud at a major insurer, is going to give you a perspective from his experience and from Kainos. Um, but before that, I just want to introduce Kainos to you because I think many of you won't know who we are. If you could move on to the next slide for me, please. Thanks very much. So yeah, we're a Belfast headquartered digital services delivery company with over 3,000 employees, specialising in really helping clients be more agile and efficient through implementing technologies such as automation, um, cloud-based delivery, data platforms, and artificial intelligence. And much of our work is delivered using various Microsoft technologies. So Kainos was founded over 36 years ago as a spin-out from Queen's University, their software engineering department, where it was a joint venture with a company that some of you on this call won't remember, a company called ICL, which stands for International Computers Limited. And ICL was actually the UK's nationalised computer company that was set up after the Second World War, really to compete with IBM. And the joint venture with Kainos was really about Kainos with its, although small in its day, but with its software engineering expertise, to crack some of the real hard problems, for ICL. ICL later were bought by Fujitsu, and many of you will recognise the name Fujitsu. And now, as I say, we're a multinational 3,000 person plus organisation that is one of the top 250 companies in the UK. And it's really that engineering pedigree that has shaped our company culture to be focused on delivering measurable business outcomes for our clients. We capability build a lot with customers. So we help them build sustained value in their businesses. And we're not just about delivering technology and walking away or just delivering, skilled people to customers. We're very much focused on business outcomes. And if you could move on a slide for me, thank you very much. This gives you a flavour of some of our financial services customers, many of whom operate in Ireland, and probably there's some of you on the call who are employees of those organisations. So hopefully that gives you a bit of background on Kainos. I'm going to hand over to Stephen now, who can discuss how we see fraud as a business problem and how we can help prevent.
Thanks very much, Gary. First and foremost, I wanted to share my location today. So I'm actually at a conference in Hampden Park, just off the back of Scotland's 2-0 win over Spain. And within the last 30 seconds, they've just started to try and test the PA system as well. So apologies if it's disruptive, but also apologies because it's Nickelback that they're playing as well. So yeah, apologies for that. So yes, look, moving into it, I think this slide is showing a number of different statistics, and clearly fraud is a huge issue for the industry as a whole. And I'm sure that you're already very familiar with the costs and impacts of fraud within your own organizations. My background is within insurance within the US, and I think within the US, the FBI has estimated that the cost of fraud is approximately 10% the size of the overall insurance market. And for a $4 trillion market, that's a massive problem. The bottom line, for everybody is that the cost of fraud gets passed on to our customers. There's increased premiums in order to support that. And again, the FBI has estimated that annually fraud costs each policyholder in the US roughly $700 per year in increased premiums. So the scale of the problem is globally is massive. I think the levels of sophistication as well that fraudsters will go to is continuously evolving. So this is not just about the odd person chancing their luck with a fraudulent claim. There is an organized crime element to this. There's a sophistication to it. And some of the proceeds of that crime as well are going into other criminal activity as well. And they're supporting things like drugs and people trafficking too. So there's a real serious criminal investment sometimes behind fraud. And in some cases, that investment in that criminal activity, to kind of exploit your business and your processes for their betterment. So there's a real imperative here to invest in and tackle fraud, just to keep up with the levels of sophistication that there are, but also to protect our good customers and our honest customers across the market as well. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So, I guess first and foremost, and in my experience, fraud is a business problem. So it's not a data science problem. It's not a data technology problem. It is a business problem. And so the response to it, again, from my own opinion, it needs to be business led, and it needs to build upon the years of experience that we have within our organizations of investigating fraud, and the investigators and SMEs that we have within our own organizations, and using that prior experience and our own understanding of the indicators of fraud and the previous investigations and cases that we've built to build up potential fraud scenarios and analytics across our business to try and identify that and prevent it. Fraud is an enterprise problem as well. So fraudsters don't abide by the organizational charts that we have, and only commit fraud whenever they're making claims, or only commit fraud whenever they're making a payment. They will try and look for and exploit any potential loophole that exists within your processes and within your technology, be that in sales, underwriting, claims, or finance. Anywhere that a transaction exists, we have to assume that there is the potential for that transaction to be exploited by a fraudster. Data and analytics will have value, but data science and data platforms on their own aren't the antidote. If you want to add the value quickly in how you tackle fraud, then it's really important that you use the knowledge that you have and the context that you have within your own organizations to identify and collect the data that indicates potential fraud and fraud that you've seen before, and based on your prior experience. So start simply, put in the simple queries and the simple analytics to capture the things that you know about across all of your systems, to start to build up that profile of your customers and their transactions with you over time. Start to think about fraud as well as fraud prevention. Start to think about the differentiated customer experiences that we can create through the use of data analytics and data platforms, and try to make the experience better for the majority of your good customers. I think we always tend within fraud to think about it punitively, and how do we actually investigate and identify and then penalize potential fraudsters. But actually there's the other side of this, which is actually how do we make a differentiated experience and support our good customers. So start to think about fraud prevention through differentiated customer experiences, make the experience better for the majority of your good customers, start to build intelligence about your customers and transactions and what that means. And then you can start to think about how you segment your market better and how you can create differentiated experiences, and implementing things like automated claims processes and increasing the satisfaction, and hopefully leading to repeat business and increased revenue with your existing customers. So in summary, make it hard for fraudsters to do business with you in the first place, and make it really easy for honest customers to do business with you as well. So what are the basics? So I'm going to talk about two key points. So, the first one is start to think about the big picture and the end-to-end customer journeys that exist within your business, and create a map of that, create an actual, depiction of that, and a visual around it. And across that map of your customer journey and how your customers come through your organization, start to put labels on that as well around the potential fraud scenarios that could exist across each of those journeys that you've mapped. And then once you've got the journeys mapped, the second thing is then start to think about, at each of those various different points, what data can we collect to actually identify potential fraud that exists at each of those points for each of those scenarios. And I guess the point here is that you're starting to build up a catalog or a taxonomy of potential fraud scenarios and data points that exist within your organization, and that'll give you a baseline of measurements, potential measurements that you can work to, and a plan of attack, if you like, around how we can start to then create a baseline or a fundamental foundation for how we can implement analytics to identify and tackle fraud. If we want to move on to the next slide. So, again, from my perspective, I think that it's inevitable that organizations are going to have to start to think about building and maintaining their own data platforms and data analytics, especially as we start to move towards the paradigm of fraud prevention and live transactions and event-based solutions. I think companies are going to need to start to think about managing their own data and build their own analytics for their own contexts. So there's no one size out of the box solution that I've seen in the market. And I think, there's definitely vendors and third party products that exist, but they have their own roadmaps and their own designs. And quite often that doesn't take into consideration, the context of you as an insurer. So I think that it's inevitable over time that organizations are going to have to start to think about their investment in their own data platforms and their own data analytics. So by going down the road of like implementing a data platform on one of the main cloud platforms like Azure, you can flexibly and incrementally start to build up your own ecosystem in response to fraud, and start to add in the required tools and components as you need them. Yes, it's technical in nature, but I think the things with likes of Microsoft is it's a well-known and accessible tech within the marketplace at the minute. And the establishment and the sourcing of the capability that's required in order to build out and implement these platforms is probably not as complicated as you might think, because these tools are now so common across the market as a whole. And I think we need to start thinking about moving away from that operating model that considers fraud in a post-transaction basis and as an investigative process, and start to think about transitioning towards that preventative model. And I guess the idea or concept here is that if you can measure it through an analytic, you can probably interrupt the behavior as well at the point that the transaction is actually generated. So start to use those analytics to score your customers, score the transactions in real time, and then based upon those indicators that you've built up, assess risk. And if the risk is low, make the experience as painless as possible. If the risk is high, make the experience more painful and hopefully interrupt the behavior in the first place. So in short, starting to use those analytics to build up a risk engine that will allow you to make more effective decisions on how the transactions are actually routed and segmented through your business. And so segmenting your good business away from your risky business and creating a differentiated experience. As your baseline of analytics starts to increase, your data maturity over time will also start to increase. And this is where the power of data will start to become more sophisticated, and we can do things like implement machine learning and AI-based analytics that will then start to pay dividends. As effectively then, rather than you or a human making the decision about what's the scenarios that I need to analyze and tweak within the risk engine, you can then use learning-based models to assess that and tune your own risk engine as you go. So the analytics themselves will learn from the data and the outputs and automate further the decision-making process. But if there's any sort of key takeaway from what I've been saying, I think the first thing is start with the simple things. Do things like create a watch list of known fraudsters within your organization. Start to think about tackling those specific scenarios that you already know about from your years of experience. Start to build up the measurements and the data analytics around that gradually, and start to think about this as an incremental value. So keep it grounded in the business. I think it's also important that is a key concept here, that it's not about the data science or the underlying technology. And if that then starts to become the focus, then things will start to drift away from the value that you can derive. So it is really, really key that we always think about fraud in the context of it being a business problem and business led. So that's it for me. I think, Gary, I'm probably going to hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Stephen, for those insights. And I know they're born of a great, depth of experience that you have. So yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, before we conclude the Kainos element of this session, I'm just going to briefly cover a couple of case studies where we've worked with our clients around fraud, leveraging data, as Stephen was talking about, utilizing machine learning and data science. So this first example is a global general insurer that was running they were already running a change program within the organization that actually was centered on improving their operational claims processes, but really with the outcome to drive increased customer satisfaction. And they recognized that if they could embed modern data science techniques directly into their claims management process, then they could better serve their honest customers and identify illegitimate claims a lot earlier in the process, because cost builds over time. So if you can identify it earlier, you're doing it in a much more cost efficient, cost effective way. So with this company, we deployed a team of data professionals to work alongside the customer's data and AI team, but also with subject matter experts from the claims team, and expert investigators. And all of that knowledge combined so that we could build a new data platform that suited all of those stakeholders' needs, really, as Stephen was talking about earlier. But that data platform is also integrated with their claims management system that enables data to move in and out in an automated and frictionless way. And so that approach enabled all of the key claim events in the process to be analysed and scored for potential anomalies. And that, therefore, providing insights and suggested next actions to the claim handlers in near real time, so with no delay. And that allowed them to process claims faster, so the good claims can go through the system quickly, but illegitimate claims could be detected a lot faster and a lot earlier, so in a lot more agile approach. That data platform and the machine learning solution resulted in data-centered claims solutions providing really significant benefits around improved customer experience and satisfaction, whilst also reducing the overall cost of claims, and also ultimately making the claim handlers' jobs easier, which drives employee satisfaction, and employee satisfaction means employees are more engaged, and that in turn helps helps customer satisfaction. If you could move on the slide for me, please. Thank you very much. So yeah, this second example is an Irish-based insurer that really had aspirations to make data be a central plank, central sort of pivot point for all of their value chain throughout the whole organization. So not just from a fraud perspective, but as Stephen was saying, they wanted to really start small and build out from there. So they'd already invested in a small team of data scientists who worked in silos or pockets throughout the organization. And whilst these individuals were having an impact in their specific area of business, there was no real consistent way of working across the organization. And they weren't really leveraging the benefits that could be gained from them being able to have a look over the horizon, see outside of their domain. So to support the development of their notion of having a centralized analytics team, Kainos helped build the central data platform for them using Microsoft technology. And that utilized the team's existing skills, which is really important to get new technology adopted by people. And it also allowed them to work with a wide selection of data tools, depending on what their preference was. So a new machine learning methodology for developing data models was adopted by the Centre of Excellence team, which really delivered better tracking of performance against objectives and delivered a faster time to market for new innovations that centered around data. And that central analytics capability is now recognized across the entirety of the business as a very powerful capability that adds significant insight and value um, across all sorts of challenges, including things like reducing customer churn, KYC and consumer duty, demand prediction, claims execution, and of course fraud detection, which is where it started. So it's an ongoing capability development, and that they're seeing significant benefits for the organisation by becoming more data centric, and use of the modern data techniques. If you could move on the slide for me, please. I think the point of the slide really is that, as Stephen was saying, this is very much about people, organisation, and processes. It's important to have a strategy and a methodology for data governance and AI responsibility, as well as using the modern tools that we have. And it's a big, now with what's happened over the last 10 years with cloud technology and telecoms bandwidth, it's a great leveler for everybody. If you could move on a slide for me. Thanks very much. So just to wrap up, thanks very much for listening to us. Our details are on the screen. We're also going to share with you the slides and our one-page fraud checklist.